Well, we're back. I'm going to talk about the era of H.A.I.G. H.A.I.G. The era of H.A.I.G. Now obviously most of you, hopefully all of you, don't know what I'm talking about. Because I didn't know what I was talking about till a few days ago. When Don, who's a listener to one of the programs I do on 3CR community radio station, rang me with what he claimed was an original idea. Now I did mention to Don that if you have one original idea in a lifetime, you're ahead. And he described the era of H.A.I.G. H.A.I.G. Now, I'm not normally that impressed, but on this particular occasion I thought this is an idea that's worth pursuing because it encapsulates the first quarter of a century of the 21st century. And we are smack in the middle of the era of H.A.I.G. So what does H.A.I.G. stands for? H stands for hypocrisy. That's right. Hypocrisy. This is one era where hypocrisy cannot be excused as ignorance. We do live in a 24/7 world. We do live in a 24-hour news cycle. At any point in time, because of the World Wide Web and telecommunications, we can be, if we wish, be aware of anything that's going on in most parts of the world. So hypocrisy has become a byword synonymous with the first quarter of a century of the 21st century. Think about it. Think about the hypocrisy surrounding the concept of parliamentary democracy, rule of the people, by the people, for the people. Where political activity in Western democracies, including Australia, is basically limited to casting a ballot every 3 to 4 years to elect someone to make decisions for you, knowing full well that real power doesn't lie in Parliament. The hypocrisy of describing or continuing to describe Australia as an egalitarian community. Think about it. We are not an egalitarian community, but we continue to behave and talk and think and culturally act as if we are part of some inclusive egalitarian society. When 1/3 of the population relies on social security benefits to survive, you begin to understand the hypocrisy behind that statement. Then we have the hypocrisy regarding what's happening in the Middle East. The hypocrisy of believing the Israeli state can do no wrong. The hypocrisy of lauding war criminals. The hypocrisy of a war criminal nominating a buffoon for a Nobel Peace Prize. The hypocrisy regarding the fact that we live in a society where everybody is equal before the law. Obviously, There is no equality before the law. The more assets you have, the more disposable income you have, the more legal representatives you had, the greater the possibility that you will not pay for criminal behaviour. In many regards, we have the ridiculous situation, the hypocrisy in this country, where people who are willing to bend the rules and exploit other people to maximise their own individual profits prosper and are lauded as celebrities and philanthropists, while people who receive a social security benefit are somehow described as leaners. Now, I could go on regarding the word hypocrisy, but hypocrisy is no longer acceptable because we can see through it, because of the World Wide Web, because of telecommunications. We can automatically see through the views, the viewpoints, the images. So the 21st century is the century of hypocrisy. So H.A.I.G. What does A stand for? A stands for arrogance. That's right, arrogance. I think arrogance was one of the 7 deadly sins. We have a situation where individuals and corporations have so much power at their disposal in a society which has become highly centralised and hierarchical. They're able to get away with anything, but not only get away with it, but look at you and spit in your face while they get away with it. That's what arrogance is. The arrogance of the buffoon in Washington who thinks that making a deal with other sovereign nation state is by setting demands, and if those demands are not met, increasing those demands. The arrogance of the individuals who dominate the World Wide Web through their ownership of the instruments, the machinery, which allows them to put forward profits before anything else. We now have a situation where anything that can generate a profit is acceptable. For example, the World Wide Web relies on advertising. The more eyeballs you have on a particular site, the more you can charge the advertisers, the greater the profits for the owners. And we've seen things like Facebook, YouTube to a lesser extent, X, formerly Twitter. You see these new technologies, these digital revolutions being used to promote hatred, division, inequality, misogyny, racism. And the people who own these platforms stare you in the face and spit in your face saying it's got nothing to do with us. The arrogance of the influencers who use the World Wide Web, the arrogance of the totalitarian leaning rulers, irrespective of whether they're self-appointed like in China by the Chinese Communist Party or elected in the United States of America like the buffoon that currently resides in Washington. Their arrogance is breathtaking. And what makes people arrogant is inequalities in power and wealth. And during the last 50 years, during the deregulation, privatisation, globalisation, corporatisation revolution which has swept the world, what we have seen is the rise and rise and rise of arrogance, not just among individuals, but by corporations who use their market domination to do what they like, when they like, knowing full well that because of their global span, that sovereign nation state have a minimal impact on their behaviour. So here we have H. hypocrisy, A. arrogance. Let's turn to I. What are we talking about when we talk about I? What is it? Is it intolerance? No. It's greater than intolerance. It's ignorance. Ignorance. How can anybody be ignorant in the 21st century? The century of technology, the digital revolution, postmodernism. How can we be ignorant? But we are. The greater the technological reach, the greater the shrinking of the globe in terms of understanding or seeing what's going around the globe, the greater the ignorance. Just a few examples of ignorance which has plunged us into an impending climate of emergency. The ignorance of vested interest, political ideologues in barring any efforts to minimise carbon emissions is breathtaking. How can we, a 21st century community, not take notice of tens of thousands who since the 1970s have been warning us about the impending climate emergency? And even when we are beginning to feel the effects of the climate emergency in all parts of the globe, even when we see the effects with our own eyes, we continue as a nation and as a global citizen to bury our head in the sand. Not because we don't want to look at or deal with what's approaching, but because vested interests whose profitability is determined by whether they are involved in activities to decrease climate emergency, we see this ignorance. Another ignorance which led to so many unnecessary deaths was the ignorance surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you think that's the last pandemic, think again. The climate emergency, increase in temperatures will ensure that there will be another pandemic. So what will we do this time? Ignore the reality, ignore the science, fight against activities that minimise the harm done to anybody else. Look at the death toll in the United States of America, where they attempted to minimise the results of COVID-19. Over 1 million dead. 1 million dead. Most of them unnecessary. At least in Australia, although we had people who claimed ignorance to fight against measures that were taken to minimise harm, especially to the older population, we at least, as a people, fought back and contained the spread of COVID-19. And what's the G? Now, I'm sure you've all got the G. H. Hypocrisy. H. Hypocrisy. G at the end. So what is the G? Greed. 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 Now, greed is one of the 7 deadly sins. Greed and gluttony. But the fact is that greed has now become an institutionalised idea through an economic system which dominates almost every aspect of almost every individual's lives. Greed. Inequalities in power and wealth have increased. Avarice and greed, not just among those who own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication, but amongst each and every one of us, pitted against each other in an economic system where greed is hailed as a virtue, not a sin, where we all, in an attempt to survive, dream about that unexpected monetary reward. Greed has now become part and parcel of each and every one of our major institutions. I'm not talking about corruption. I'm talking about something that goes beyond corruption. But greed, having institutions, having structures, having economic systems which reward those who exploit other people, who exploit their labour, who take away their resources. This is the type of greed that we're talking about. It's not an aberration. It's part and parcel of the foundation stone of our society. A society which is based on inequality. So we are in the era of H.A.I.G. Hypocrisy, greed, ignorance, and the list goes on and on. So it's a good way to think about the society we live in. It's a good way. And the thing about living in any community, in any society, we need to be able to join the dots. We need to be able to understand what is happening. It's not complex. It's relatively easy. And what we've seen over the last half a century is the creation of cultural norms, creation of institutions, creation of viewpoints which highlight the hypocrisy, the intolerance, the greed in our society. And it is a disease, because as human beings we are capable, and we have shown it historically in the past, to be able to overcome the issues that plague our era. It's not an individual struggle, it's a collective struggle. We need to be involved in that collective struggle. Joining public interest before corporate interest is one way to try to derail this juggernaut which has created so much misery, so much intolerance, so much hatred, so much division, so much ignorance, so much greed, so much hypocrisy in our society in the first quarter of the 21st century.